The CEO fired the single dad in front of the entire company, and the humiliation was so brutal that nobody in the room dared to look at him. Daniel Carter stood frozen beside his desk, holding the cardboard box that contained everything he had left in his small office. His coworkers watched in silence as he lowered his eyes, trying desperately to hide the tears gathering there. But what the CEO didn't know was that Daniel wasn't leaving behind just a desk, a computer, and a few family photographs. He was leaving behind something that would force the most powerful man in the company to question everything he believed about people, loyalty, and kindness. Daniel had worked at Sterling Innovations for nearly 7 years. He wasn't an executive, a manager, or someone whose name appeared on the company website. He was simply a senior systems specialist who arrived before most employees and often stayed long after the building emptied. His clothes were always neat but modest. His shoes had been repaired more than once, and he carried the same worn leather bag every day. What nobody at work knew was that Daniel was raising his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, alone. Every morning before work, he packed her lunch, checked her homework, walked her to the school bus, and then rushed across town to make it to the office on time. His entire life revolved around one promise he had made to Lily after losing her mother. No matter how difficult life became, she would never feel alone. If stories about kindness, second chances, and people who quietly sacrifice for others mean something to you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Bright Heart. Your support helps these emotional stories reach people who may need a reminder that one act of kindness can change an entire life. The trouble began when a new CEO named Victor Hale took control of Sterling Innovations. Victor was young, brilliant, wealthy, and obsessed with results. He had transformed several failing companies and believed that emotion had no place in business. During his first month, he demanded productivity reports from every department and began eliminating anyone he considered unnecessary. Daniel noticed something strange in the new system. An automated program was incorrectly labeling thousands of legitimate customer accounts as fraudulent, creating financial losses that were growing every day. Daniel spent several nights investigating the problem and eventually discovered that the issue wasn't with the software itself. Someone had changed a critical security setting during the company's transition. Daniel prepared a detailed report and sent it to management, but Victor never read it. Instead, the CEO saw Daniel's name repeatedly appearing in system alerts and assumed the employee was responsible for the irregularities. The following morning, Daniel was summoned to the main conference room. When he walked in, dozens of employees were already gathered. Victor stood at the front with several executives beside him, and on the giant screen behind them were charts showing the company's recent losses. Daniel immediately understood that something was wrong. Victor accused him of negligence and claimed that his mistakes had placed the company at serious financial risk. Daniel tried to explain that he had discovered the problem and had been working to fix it, but Victor had already made his decision. In front of everyone, he told Daniel that his employment was terminated effective immediately. The room became painfully quiet. Daniel looked around at the people he had helped for years, hoping someone would say something, but fear kept everyone silent. His hands trembled as he packed his belongings into a cardboard box. He placed his daughter's photograph inside last. For a moment, he stared at the picture of Lily smiling beside a birthday cake and swallowed the lump in his throat. He wanted to defend himself. He wanted to tell Victor how many nights he had spent protecting the company's systems, how many coworkers had called him after hours when something broke, and how he had saved the company from disasters nobody even knew existed. But Daniel knew that arguing would not change anything, so he quietly carried the box toward the elevator. Nobody noticed the small envelope that slipped from the box and fell behind his desk. Daniel reached the lobby with tears in his eyes. He had less than $100 in his bank account, a daughter waiting at home, and no idea how he would pay next month's rent. He sat on a bench outside the building for several minutes, staring at the city traffic while his phone buzzed with a message from Lily asking when he would be home. Daniel wiped his eyes before replying that everything was fine, but everything was not fine. That evening, he told Lily that he had lost his job. Instead of crying, the little girl climbed onto his lap and wrapped her arms around him. She reminded him that he had once told her that losing one door didn't mean the whole world had closed. Daniel smiled through his tears, realizing that sometimes children remembered the lessons adults forgot. The next morning, Victor arrived at Sterling Innovations expecting another ordinary day. Instead, his security director rushed into his office with an urgent report. The company's main servers were under attack, and several critical systems were failing. The IT department tried everything, but the problem was deeper than they expected. The strange part was that Daniel had warned them about exactly this vulnerability in his report. Victor demanded to see Daniel's report. An executive finally opened the document that Daniel had submitted days earlier. Every warning, every technical explanation, and every recommended solution was there. Victor's face changed as he realized Daniel had not caused the problem. He had discovered it. Then the security director found something even more disturbing. Someone had deliberately altered the system settings after Daniel reported the vulnerability. The person responsible was a senior executive who had been secretly manipulating financial records to hide his own misconduct. Victor immediately ordered an investigation. But something else was bothering him. He remembered Daniel leaving the conference room with that cardboard box. Victor went downstairs and walked toward Daniel's old desk. The office looked strangely empty. The plant Daniel had cared for sat beside the monitor, and a small photograph remained taped to the inside of the drawer. Victor opened the desk carefully and discovered the envelope that had fallen earlier. Inside was a handwritten note. It wasn't a resignation letter or a complaint. It was a list. For months, Daniel had been secretly keeping track of employees who were struggling financially. A receptionist whose husband had lost his job. A young employee who needed help paying for his mother's medicine. A security guard whose daughter needed school supplies. Daniel had been quietly using part of his own paycheck to help them, never telling anyone. At the bottom of the list was a note about Victor. Daniel had written that the new CEO seemed angry and overwhelmed, and that perhaps someone should remind him that employees were human beings before they were numbers. Victor read the sentence twice. The man he had humiliated in front of the entire company had been thinking about his well-being. Victor sat alone at Daniel's desk, surrounded by silence, and for the first time since becoming CEO, he felt ashamed. He learned that Daniel had been working extra hours, not because he was careless, but because he was protecting the company. He learned that Daniel had turned down promotions that required relocation because his daughter needed stability. He learned that Daniel had once stayed at the office all night during a major system failure, then gone directly to Lily's school because he had promised to attend her morning presentation. Most importantly, Victor discovered that Daniel had never told anyone about the sacrifices he made. Victor found Daniel's address through the company records and drove there himself. The small apartment was nothing like Victor's luxurious home. There was an old couch, a tiny kitchen, a stack of school books, and Lily's drawings covering one wall. Daniel opened the door and froze when he saw Victor standing outside. Victor didn't come to offer excuses. He came to apologize. He admitted that he had judged Daniel without hearing the truth. He admitted that he had allowed power and pressure to make him cruel. Then he offered Daniel his job back, a promotion, full compensation for the time he had lost, and something Daniel valued even more. A public apology Daniel didn't accept immediately. He asked Victor one question that changed the entire company. He asked whether the apology was only for him or whether Victor was finally ready to treat every employee with the same respect. Victor understood. The next morning, every employee at Sterling Innovations received an unexpected invitation to an all-company meeting. Victor stood before the same people who had watched Daniel being fired. This time, Daniel stood beside him. Victor publicly admitted that he had made a terrible mistake. He explained how Daniel had protected the company, how his warnings had been ignored, and how his own judgment had failed him. Then he announced new policies designed to protect employees from unfair termination and created an emergency assistance fund for workers facing financial hardship. Daniel was offered the position of Director of Employee Systems and Support, but he requested one condition. He wanted the company to help struggling employees without forcing them to beg for assistance. Victor agreed. Months later, Sterling Innovations was doing better than ever. The fraudulent executive was gone, the security problem had been fixed, and employee morale had completely changed. Daniel still carried his old leather bag, but now Lily's photograph sat proudly on his desk. One afternoon, Victor walked past Daniel's office and saw Lily visiting her father. She was holding a drawing she had made for him. Victor smiled and realized that the little girl had unknowingly helped change an entire company. Daniel had once walked out of Sterling Innovations carrying a cardboard box, believing he had lost everything. Instead, he had left behind a lesson powerful enough to change the heart of a CEO. Sometimes the person you push aside is the person who was quietly holding everything together. Sometimes the employee you judge by his clothes is the person carrying the heaviest responsibilities. And sometimes the greatest mistake in your life becomes the moment that teaches you how to become a better human being. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Bright Heart. Your engagement may seem small, but it helps stories like this reach people who need a little hope when life feels unfair. Before the story ends, I have one special request. Comment. Kindness deserves a second chance. If you believe that people should be judged by the goodness of their hearts, not by their circumstances, because Daniel didn't win by getting revenge on the CEO. He won by remaining kind when the world gave him every reason to become bitter. And sometimes, that is the strongest victory of all.